It's been a bad week for the massed battalions of politicians and journalists who have teamed up with fascists against Muslims in Britain. There's Nigel Farage, who said with no evidence that 3/4 of Muslims pose no threat to Britain, implying that 1/4 do. There's Suella Braverman, who did more as Home Secretary to legitimise Islamophobia than anyone else has done before or since. There's Douglas Murray, the ever reasonable face of the hard right, who said that Britain needed, quotes, a toolbox approach to dealing with the enemy of Islamic extremism, end quotes, and that this would involve, quotes, people who you and I don't like, end quotes. In 2018, Murray called for the release of the English Defence League's founder, Tommy Robinson, and described the organisation as, quotes, a street protest movement in Britain whose aims could probably be best summarised as anti-Islamisation. We should also name Robinson himself, who was on holiday in Cyprus when the revolution finally came to the streets of Southport, Hartlepool and Manchester. For this was the week, in Murray's words, that people that you and I don't like but need to deal with falsely cast the killer of 3 children as an asylum seeker and a Muslim. This was the week when Britain weathered the worst fascist insurgency for 100 years since Cable Street, as mobs attempted to set fire to hotels housing migrants, attack police with bricks, and now face long prison sentences. Worse was to follow for the likes of Farage, Braverman and Murray. On Wednesday night, the very Muslim communities they had spent a lifetime vilifying as no-go areas stood up to the fascists and forced them off the streets. Far from condemning this show of force as vigilantism, Metropolitan Police Chief Mark Rowley praised the demonstrators, saying fears of disorders were abated due to the work of the police and a show of unity from communities. This week should cast a long shadow over the links between the thugs and the very people who have carved careers out of dripping racist poison into the well of public discourse. Because their fascist bedfellows will not be so easy to erase. Robinson himself is funded by an array of far-right international organisations, an intrinsic part of the US right-wing infrastructure supporting Israel. It's think tanks like the Philadelphia-based the Middle East Forum, whose president Daniel Pipes confirmed to the Times of Israel that his group had spent $60,000 on 3 demonstrations defending Robinson, who served 4 prison terms between 2005 and 2019. Another supporter is the David Horowitz Freedom Center. Horowitz himself described Robinson in an email to The Guardian as a courageous Englishman who risked his life to expose the rape epidemic of young girls conducted by Muslim gangs and covered up by your shameful government. In an interview with Israel's Channel 13, Robinson this week attributed the riots to the presence of Hamas supporters on the streets of London. He said, "What we've seen since October the 7th is the takeover of our capital city every single week by pro-Hamas, pro-jihadi groups who are encouraging hatred on our streets, and they're unchallenged by the police." Robinson visited Israel in 2016, posing with tanks on the Golan Heights, because long before the events of the 7th of October, the fascist far-right and neoliberal Zionists had everything in common. They used the same techniques. They used lies to vilify their targets. The riots started with a lie. The perpetrator of the horrendous knife attack in Southport was born in Wales to Rwandan Christian parents. Hey, so let's go and attack the local mosque. Exactly the same technique was used to knock out 3 thriving primary schools in Birmingham. The Trojan Horse affair, an alleged Islamist takeover of several primary schools in Birmingham, was a complete fabrication. But this did not stop the government minister, Michael Gove, and the Times, no less, from campaigning about it. As the streets of Southport Hartlepool and Manchester were still being cleared of rubble. MP Robert Jenrick, who sponsored legislation against the BDS movement, continued to spread lies. The former Tory immigration minister said that all those chanting Allahu Akbar should be immediately arrested because it was an extremist chant. It is said by every Muslim worshipper every day. Long before the October the 7th attack on Israel, both groups, the fascists and the stalwarts of pro-Israel lobbying, collectively cast migrants, Muslims and pro-Palestinian supporters as rapists. Way back in 2017, when Angela Merkel was still Germany's Chancellor, Murray laid into her policy of opening the borders to Syrian refugees, saying it had resulted in, quotes, a bit more gang rape and beheadings than we've been used to. This unholy alliance has much else in common. Both believe that Israel is stopping a horde of migrants from Muslim nations from invading Europe, that Islam is a threat to the Judeo-Christian way of life, and that Israel is the ethno-nationalist model for how a state cleansed of Muslims should look like. Total silence from Murray, total silence about the organised campaign of rape in Israeli detention camps of Palestinian detainees. For the work in defending the indefensible, Murray was praised by Israeli President Yitzhak Herzog as a compelling voice of moral clarity for his support of Israel during the Gaza War. The Gaza War only accelerated the love affair between these Zionists and fascists. They collectively mythologized London as a no-go area for Jews, despite the fact that Jews were present as individuals and as a group in Palestine solidarity demonstrations. Today, Murray and Farage are the arsonists, blaming the fire they set on the late arrival of the fire brigade. But Keir Starmer's Labour has also played in these murky waters, because Starmer is privately just as anxious not to praise the Muslim community, whose leaders, the Muslim Council of Britain, he to this day refuses to meet. A battle going on in Finchley, North London, reveals the schism running through the heart of the Labour Party. It started in May when a demonstration was mounted by pro-Palestinian supporters outside the Phoenix Cinema, which was screening a film about the Nova Music Festival attacked by Hamas on the 7th of October. A counter-protest supporting the film appeared, but this time, unusually, it contained a new element and a violent one, the EDL, waving English and Israeli flags and shouting racist slurs. The appearance of the EDL in Finchley, an area with a high concentration of Jewish people, was not accidental. But when a group calling itself Finchley Against Fascism shared a virtual flyer calling for a demonstration, it said, "Get fascists, racists, Nazis, Zionists and Islamophobes out of Finchley." The inclusion of Zionists in the hit list was condemned by local MP Sarah Sackman, who is herself Jewish. As journalist Owen Jones commented, if Sackman had just denounced the flyer, without going on to denounce the protest, that might have been understandable. As it is, Sackman denounced the entire event. It only took one day for the Labour Party to part company with the anti-fascist movement that had helped quell the biggest fascist insurrection in modern history, because the Labour Party has been hard at work disenfranchising its Muslim voters ever since Israel began its offensive in Gaza. Labour lost 5 seats to independents over its policy of supporting Israel's right to defend itself in Gaza and its opposition to an immediate and permanent ceasefire. Today, Starmer has forbidden Labour's elected representatives from attending the recent anti-fascist demonstrations, just as he did pro-Palestinian rallies. And depressingly true to form, Chief Rabbi Ephraim Mirvis posted on X this week, "Many in the British Jewish community are feeling trapped between the anvil of the hateful far right and the hammer of the conspiratorial extreme left. You cannot hug fascists who support Israel." Allow fascists to join ranks with you in counter-demonstrations, and then whine when the fascists show their true colours. Support for a Jewish homeland in Israel has dragged some British Jews from their rightful place, which is side by side with Muslims as victims of fascism. But not all. Many Jewish people remain true to their beliefs and are part of the broad pro-Palestinian movement trying to stop the daily carnage in Gaza. Every Jew knows that once fascists deal with one minority, they will turn on another. So what stops the chief rabbi joining ranks with Muslims after they have been so egregiously attacked? Israel. Its ugly history and even uglier present deforms every attempt to reconcile staunch supporters of a Jewish homeland with the Muslim community. It's well past time for a new generation of community leaders to step forward, one that is prepared to walk in step and in solidarity with the oppressed. And that is Britain's only hope.